Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and the end of another day of my Bulgaria trip. And I am currently sitting in a guest room in Bansko, which is known to a lot of people because it's a ski resort. Not that I am here to do any skiing because it's completely the wrong time of year, and even if it was, well, it's just not my thing. I tried it in Japan. Not my bag, baby. Anyway, what's happened today? Well, I woke up in Asenovgrad this morning, a little bit later than I planned, but I had a very good night's sleep. And I... insects. Yes, so I woke up in Asenovgrad, and then I went to the Asenovgrad fortress, which is the kind of prime thing that you do there. And it was good and bad. It was good. In fact, the setting was unbelievable. It's an absolutely amazing setting for a fortress. And also the church, the fortress church, was really, really atmospheric, and I found it quite a powerful place. It was bad because there wasn't a lot of fortress. There was a few walls, but you couldn't really tell what they had been, and I think even when they were something, they probably weren't that impressive. And there was no labelling or anything. So, yeah, there was a carved stone that I think said that it was Athens. But, yeah, apart from that, that was that. So I wandered around this fortress and I enjoyed the views. And there were rumbles in the sky. And I wondered, at first I thought it was planes going overhead, and then I realised we could be in for a thunderstorm. And I went on then to Bachkovo Monastery. Now, Bachkovo is one of the kind of holy trinity of big monasteries in Bulgaria. The other two being Troyan and Rila. And of course, Troyan I've been to, that's seen as number 3, Bachkovo is number 2, and so Rila, the top one, is for tomorrow, and then I will have done the Holy Trinity. And Bachkovo Monastery, I enjoyed it very much. Like Troyan, actually. It's bigger than Troyan. I think it's the second biggest in the country. And its claim to holiness, it was set up by 2 Georgian brothers, actually. But its claim to holiness is that it has an icon of the Virgin Mary painted by St. Luke. And that's in the main church. And I saw it, and I prayed before the icon. And I found it powerful. Like, I mean, the thing is, there's not a lot of it that you can see because it's obviously very old, and you know, it's like surrounded by gold, and what there is not clear. But there is something incredible to think I could be looking into the eyes of the Virgin Mary as painted from life. Now, of course, the historian in me says, "Well, really, really, Matt." And that's true, and of course St. Luke is meant to have been an artist, and there's meant the Mandilion, which is the famous painting of Christ, is meant to have been a likeness painted by St. Luke. But certainly, I mean, I don't think this is the only Virgin Mary, because I'm pretty sure there was another one in Kikos when we went there last year, but so he may have spent most of the time after Christ's resurrection painting pictures of his mum. But I don't know. I mean, that's part of faith, isn't it? It's the possibility that it could be. Because it does also throw up other problems. It's like, well, she's a young lady in the photos, and one assumes she would have been a lot older then. So did he imagine what she was like when she was young? And then the baby, who's that based on? But let's not get into the technicalities. Let's just say there is a painting of the Virgin Mary, painted from life, and I venerated it today, and wasn't that wonderful? So Bachkovo sat around 2 courtyards. The older church is in the upper courtyard, and that one was actually shut to visitors, but there was a museum, which was quite interesting. There was, the usual icons and crosses with intricate wood detailing, and there was a pilgrim certificate of absolution after they'd made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. That was nice. And so yes, I enjoyed the museum, and I also enjoyed an exhibition of artwork. And normally a lot of artwork doesn't do that much for me, but these paintings, they were, I'll write the name of the painter in the bottom, but they were by this young lady, well, I assume she was young, she might have been old, but this lady who, and I think she'd been commissioned by the Orthodox Church to paint these paintings, and they were of religious subjects, monasteries in Athos, monasteries in Russia also, and in Bulgaria, and Ohrid was then North Macedonia, but there was also seeing some Gethsemane, there was pictures of famous holy figures, and they were really powerful, and they had a kind of almost fantasy element to them. It was like orthodoxy mixed with Lord of the Rings, but they were brilliant. Oh, and a bit of Van Gogh as well. Like there was, twirly skies with stars and stuff. It's yeah, my hair's gone all Tintin. What must happen when you get old? Anyway, yeah, brilliant, brilliant. I really like them. Would love to buy. I wouldn't love to buy them the paints because they're bloody expensive, but I'd love to buy some prints. They're really good. So yeah, that was that. Now Alex had warned me before that there is a refectory and it's closed, but you can ask to go in it, and he said don't miss it. So I did do that, and I'm really glad that he'd said that because this refectory was the place where the monks ate in the old days. It's got this massive stone table down the middle, but the walls were covered in frescoes, and they were literally the best I've seen. They were unbelievable, and I had the place to myself because I had to ask in the museum, and the guy opened it up for me. I had to pay another 8 level, but okay. And I just sat there and imagined I was a monk, and this is what I'd see as I'm eating my dinner. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so I went round the church. Very busy, but all Bulgarians. There was one French couple. So yeah, foreign tourism. Still on Sunny Beach and Golden Sands. It's not up here. And then when I was coming out, I noticed 2 small chapels high on the mountain. So I walked to the first one, and that was quite nice because it was a sort of quiet place where I prayed the Jesus prayer and had a bit of a think. And then I drove on, and maybe it was the effect of the holy place, or maybe it was just what I was doing, but it became a bit of a journey of the spirit because the road that I took, which was from Asenovgrad to Smolyan, is one that I travelled 25 years ago. And it may even be to the day, it's certainly about this time, it was July, August time, that I did it, because it was the university holidays, and it was my first trip to Bulgaria, and I flew into Bucharest, took the train to Saratoga, where I stayed with a friend of a friend, and then I went to Smolyan. So I went to Plovdiv and then took this bus to Smolyan because my pen friend Eva was staying with her aunt, who used to be the MP for Smolyan, and so she said, "Come to Smolyan, it's really nice." And I remember this bus journey, and I hadn't travelled much by that time, and just how beautiful the scenery was. And I was really starting to fall in love with Bulgaria, on that journey. And it was, yeah, it is beautiful. I'd remembered correctly. And so I was half there in the car and half I was on a bus 25 years ago, going to meet this girl who I didn't know, and on one of life's great adventures. And as I went further along, we got to a place called Pamporovo, which is a ski resort. It's one of the 3 big ski resorts in Bulgaria. And actually, when I was staying in Smolyan, we'd gone on a day trip to Pamporovo with Eva's aunt and uncle, and it was interesting. An indication of how poor Bulgaria was then is, although they were amazing hosts, but they said, "Can we have money for the petrol?" Because they couldn't afford to drive the 15 kilometres or so there and back. To just down the road, it should be a trip that now they probably wouldn't think about making. And obviously, it was pennies to me. It was nothing, but they were really different times, and although Bulgaria does look a bit rougher on the edges in some places, it really has moved on. So yes, I saw Pamporovo where we'd gone, we'd taken the chairlift obviously for the skiers in the winter, but in the summer it's nice because you go up the mountain to this tower called Snizhanka, which I think means Snow White. And I know we had some photos taken on the top of the tower. It was brilliant. And so I saw the tower. And then continued on, and I was really desperate for the toilet, and so I needed somewhere to stop. And I saw this sign for Smolyan Castle. And so I thought, well, I'll stop there. And it was a kilometre's walk from the car park, but beautiful walk through the woods. And then I got to this castle. Now, it wasn't much of a castle. It was a Byzantine fort. There was basically a north wall and a south wall, and they didn't build anymore because the terrain was its own defence. But the views from this place were unbelievable. They were literally some of the best views I've ever had in my life. I had it to myself. I watched butterflies flit about, listened to crickets chirp, and it was wonderful. It was an absolutely brilliant detour. And but there was only one problem. So I took my book because I thought, oh, I could read this. And then when I realised it was a bit of a hike, I left it by the side of the path because I thought, well, there's nobody else around here. I'll pick it up on the way back. When I got back, it had gone. And there's literally like one other person had passed. And I thought, oh, that's a bit... I mean, maybe they thought it had just been abandoned and it might be interesting. But I don't know. They'd seen a foreigner go past. So slight more on there. I mean, a bit stupid of me to do, but you just don't think somebody's going to pick up a book. You don't think they'll even notice it. I mean, anyway. But next to the... I had a bite to eat. And then next to the car park of the castle, there was a road down to a monastery. So I thought, well, I'll go to that. And it was the monastery St. Pantaleimon. Because the name I remember from his Dark Materials. Don't know who St. Pantaleimon was. But it's a new monastery. And it was established in 1995. And when I arrived, I seem to recall that when I went on that day trip with Eva's aunt and uncle, we stopped at this new monastery on the way back, and that must have been it. And I think it was still maybe under construction, or maybe there was like a temporary wooden church. So it's now quite established. I mean, it's architecturally it's nothing, because it's modern. But it's interesting to see, it now more established. So I went there, and then I went into Smolyan, and my intention was to go to the museum, but I couldn't find it. But in the end, I just found myself like driving around Smolyan and remembering like my time there, which was really happy. I drove past a nightclub called Top Stars, where I'd gone with Eva and a couple of her friends, and that's where I discovered Chalga. Like they were playing Chalga, and I said, "Oh, what's Chalga?" And then and I really love Chalga. I love it to this day. So yeah, Top Stars and Smolyan. It's still called Top Stars. It was dated then. But what I did do, I wondered where her aunt's apartment was, and I couldn't quite find it. I think I knew the rough area, but what I did do is I went to the bus station, because I went to the bus station, which is a very forlorn and dilapidated place, because I remember, and what you've got to remember is that Eva was somebody who changed my life, because, I mean, I'm going to be honest, she was my first love. She was the first girl I really, really fell for. Now, we didn't end up together, okay, and I was pretty devastated by that. And so I only knew her for 3 years, but it was because of her, and particularly when it didn't work out and how devastated it was, that I started writing. So and I also started reading as well, because she kind of reminded me that I thought I was this clever guy that is really interested in dynamic, and I was actually a guy who just spent most of the time in the pub. And I thought, right, okay, and I started reading, I started writing, and I cut down on drinking. And I mean, not that she ever told me to do any of that, but indirectly, because of her, my life changed massively. And I remember the day when I first saw her, and obviously I'd only seen pictures of her before because she was a pen friend. And pulling into the bus, I saw her sitting on a bench waiting. And so I stood where the bus would have been and looked at the bench. And then I went and sat on the bench and looked out at, where the bus would have been. And I wondered, what did she think? Because I've always thought what I thought when I first saw her, which was she doesn't look quite like the photos, but she's quite cute. I wonder what she thought of me. And I'll never know because we're not in touch. And that's a shame. And that maybe that's one of the reasons I always wanted to be in touch, to ask something like that. But you know what? No matter what happened at the end, and it did end a bit nastily, that holiday and the one the following year were two of the most amazing, happiest trips I've ever had. So, for that reason alone, you know, thanks, Eva. Um, and so, it was this little trip down memory lane. And anyway, then it was time to go on. There was one little mystery. So I remember when we went from Pomporovo, we stopped somewhere and there was this like rock overlooking the town, and it was something to do with Orpheus, because apparently Orpheus is from the Rodopi. And then there was some legend about a woman jumping off a rock or something. I can't remember it, but I saw this statue of a woman who looked like she might be jumping off a rock. It was pretty amazing, common to see a statue. So I made a detour to take a photo of that. Couldn't find the Orpheus statue though. But maybe that was the statue. I remember it's hazy after 25 years, literally. Maybe they told me it was about Orpheus. But anyway, whatever the case. Yeah. And then I started driving again. And, it was a long, long drive to my accommodation, which is here in Bansko. Not that long in kilometres, less than 200, but slow, windy roads. But I was driving not that long, and then I went through this town called, I think it was called Shiroluka or something. Shirokoluka? Something. Luka is lake, and anyway, it's this little. I couldn't say a lake anyway, but there was a river. But it's pretty old village with this gorgeous church, so I stopped because it was also pretty, and took some photos and went to the church, and it was most wonderful with naive peasant type paintings and very naive icons, but so beautiful. It was like probably the best church I've visited in the whole of my trip in Bulgaria. Early 19th century, so in the Ottoman era, so low down, but stone tiled roof, brilliant. But and I normally buy 3 candles in every church and make 3 specific prayers. But this one I just bought one, and I lit the candle for Eva to say thank you for what happened 25 years ago, and I hope she's doing okay now. And that's that. But then I motored on, and it was just a gorgeous but slow drive through the Rodopi, and it went on forever, but it was wonderful. Lots of mountain vistas, and of course, going through the Pomak area, where the Pomaks are Muslim people who they were Christians and they converted en masse. I think it was the 17th century. Often the priest would convert and the whole congregation would follow them. And they live in these mountain villages, and they've been subject to a lot of discrimination over the years, name changing campaigns, that kind of stuff. But they've survived, and I actually know and used to know very well a Pomak girl called May, and she was actually a friend of Eva's. I mean, they went to university together. That's how I knew her. And she came from that region, and she'd actually fixed me up with a Pomak guy who could sit and talk to me about Pomak culture today, and it fell through because he got a job and couldn't do it, which was a real shame. But anyway, I was driving through the region and really enjoying it, and then I saw a sign for this village called Vulkasel, and I thought, I've heard of that before. And then I realised when I used to write letters to Fat Mate, that was her village. So I took a detour and I went through her village. And who knows, I may have gone past her house. And I took a village, and it was a wonderful place. I mean, really picturesque, gorgeous journey. But, there was like a cow in the street, and there was, like old ladies in headscarves and old guys all sat on benches outside, chewing the fat. And it was just kids walking up and down. It was a brilliant place, dogs wandering around. It was great. And anyway, and then I continued on my long drive to the town of Gotzidelchev, by which time it was dark by then. And then I schlepped it down to Bansko, which is where I am now. And then tomorrow, I am going to go to Rila Monastery, which is, even before I met Eva, that was the site that everyone said you need to go to. And it was the one site I've never been, and I always intended to go, and I've always missed it for one reason or another. So I'm going to hit the biggest site in Bulgaria last of all, and then it's a drive into Sofia. I hope to maybe go to Boyana Church as well, and possibly the Sufi Teke that the lady in the Manyabashi Mosque mentioned. So should be some good stuff, but a lot less driving than today. And that's it from me, Will Travelling Matt. From, well, not from the Rodopi now, but from Bansko.
Заиграли с